You're listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk.
Number 359.
Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Station. New media, or social media, as it's probably more well known these days, has certainly established itself in all our lives, whether we like it or not. In the last series about the ultralight scene, I think everyone agreed that the single most influential aspect which aided the development of this niche market was the affordable and exciting new media. Now, when I say new media, I refer to the introduction and acceptance of the internet and, amongst others, podcasts from way back in 2005, and look at the ground that we've covered. But let's take that a stage further. YouTube has an incredible 72 hours of video loaded onto it every single minute. Any subject you want, under the sun, you can find it on YouTube. And records show that in 2011 it topped 1 trillion views, and that's 140 views for every person on Earth. So I think we can safely say that by 2013, as we are now, new media in whatever form is here to stay. It's not hard to conclude, therefore, that we are, by our very nature, sharing beasts. We love to share our knowledge and passion, love and experiences about whatever it is that turns us on. To give you an idea of numbers involved, that last podcast series I did on the future of ultralight gear has been downloaded just under 80,000 times in less than 5 weeks. So not only do we want to share information, it appears the people also want to be entertained by it as well. My interests lean more towards the audio and video medium. Andy, however, is stimulated by other aspects of social media and the technology involved. And here is Andy to explain more.
Just 15 or 20 years ago, it would have been almost impossible to imagine how the internet would become so central to so many areas of our everyday life. And comparatively recently, few would have been able to predict that the dramatic growth of the net would be down in no small part to that very human desire to share stories and experiences, not just with friends and family, but with others who share our common interests, perhaps people on the other side of the globe. Today, the outdoors world has its own social network, Social Hiking at shareyouradventure.com, created by computer programmer and outdoor enthusiast Phil Sowell. Recently, I travelled to Northamptonshire to meet Phil, and we spent a very geeky afternoon walking around Salsey Forest, talking about social media, open source online communities, and how the outdoors world might make best use of them. Then we sat down to talk about the development of social hiking in particular, and about where it might go in the future. Naturally, I started by asking Phil how the idea for social hiking first came about.
About 3 years ago, I decided to walk Offa's Dyke, which is a long-distance path from the north to South Wales, to raise money for the MS Society. And I'd been using Twitter for probably about 6 months or so before that, and I really wanted a way that I could combine what we were doing, so actually walking, with sharing photos and tweets to allow people to share in what we were doing and to help raise more money and to interact and engage with our supporters.
So the idea of how social hiking was born. Now, some people listening to this will have explored social hiking already, but I guess the majority of people probably won't, and yet those same people will be using Facebook, will be using Twitter. So just give us an outline of how social hiking works. If I sign up and develop a social hiking, start a social hiking account tomorrow, what can I expect to see there? How can I expect to use it?
What it essentially does, in its basic sense, is as you're walking, you share your location. So there are various ways you can do that, either by sharing live using an app like ViewRanger, or just recording your GPX. So that's one side of it, is your location as you're doing your walk. The second side is you just share media as you would normally, so on Twitter, Instagram, taking photos on your camera maybe and uploading them to Flickr or Picasa. And what social hiking does is it takes the two and combines it together to give you an interactive, media-filled map of the route and walk that you did. Either live or afterwards when you get home.
So to just give you people an idea of what that means, I've got a friend of mine, Colin Ibbotson, who's a long-distance hiker, who's just been cycling around Tasmania, and I can look at his social hiking page. I can see where he's been, I can see the tweets that he's produced, I can see some of the photographs he's produced as well, all in one place, which kind of really does feel that you're sharing his adventure kind of in real time.
Absolutely, and what I've tried to achieve with it is that for Colin, for example, he uses a spot device. So every day he just switches it on and puts it in his rucksack and takes photos with his camera and just uploads them. The site does all the hard work of combining it together to show a kind of example of what you were doing.
And he is someone who's going to spend the next 2 years of his life on long distance trails. So I guess in a sense he's producing really quite a new channel of entertainment for most of us.
Oh, absolutely. And he started using social hiking very early on, doing the Arizona Trail, and he's since done the Colorado Trail and then his exploration of Tasmania. And it is brilliant to follow his journey as he does them.
I must admit, I started following him on the Arizona Trail and looking at this map and realising it was such a big place, such a big map. The dot didn't seem to move very much from day to day, so I kind of stopped following him.
He was in the early days. He was only sharing a couple of positions a day. That was before he moved on to a spot device, which is a much better device for kind of much longer trips like Colin does.
To be fair, you don't have to be an intrepid explorer like Colin to use social hiking. I mean, there are some people who like, nipping to the pub in the evening and going out with their dogs, and they like communicating that, letting people know where they are, and that seems to be just as fine, just as interesting and fascinating in its own way.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've got people who will share a couple of miles walking in their local park, maybe climbing up their local hill. It's all about sharing what you're doing, your adventure. It doesn't have to be a kind of epic trip across the globe. Even if it's just like today for our walk around Salsey Forest, that was being shared on social hiking.
I think I started my walking blog about 9 years ago now, or 8.5 years ago, and I was quite stunned by the number of people who followed it and still do. I mean, leaving aside the sometimes completely banal stuff that's on there. I mean, it is fascinating that people do seem to really want to share a lot of their experiences, but there's a limit to that in conventional media, and in the web, or a blog in a sense is kind of new media 1.5 really. What you are doing with social hiking is potentially being able to pull together so many things, disparate things in one place, but yet it's not really platform specific, is it?
No, when I first started building it, I was really keen to not require that you had to use a certain app or that you had to use a certain service. I wanted to support the services and apps that people use. So we although it started off using ViewRanger for location, we quickly added another service, albeit now defunct, called Instamapper, because there were people who preferred it, and we're looking at supporting Google Latitude, because again there are people who use that on a regular basis and want to use social hiking, and likewise with media services. Whether or not you use Instagram or Twitter Photo or TwitPic or Flickr or Picasa, it doesn't matter. It's about the photo that you're sharing and helping you to put that into context as to your overall trip.
I think that's quite important. I mean, over the last couple of months, we begin to see a lot of grumbling from people using Facebook who are just getting kind of fed up about the way in which they're now being deluged with adverts and advertising, and that seems to be the price that we're paying for having what's notionally a free service. But it does strike me that we can't assume that one of these services is going to last forever, or that really one of these services is the only solution. And I guess your approach is only really limited by the imagination of various companies who can drag material into it. So you will develop your social hiking platform for anybody who wants to work and link with you.
Absolutely. It does need the web to be open. It needs services to allow users to use their data how they want to use their data. But a good example of what you're saying is as people evolve and as they use different services. For Instagram, for example, with their recent issue with their terms of service, a lot of people have left Instagram. But on Social Hiking, we support another very similar service called StreamZoo, which quite a few users moved over to. So it's as long as sites allow you to share your data out to who you want to share it with, then we'll happily support any service that we can integrate with to allow you to use it.
Now, at this point, I think it would be worthwhile just us reflecting on the power and the importance of a commitment to open software and open source, because you must have thought at some point in the past about producing your own app, your own mapping app for a mobile phone, but have chosen not to go down that route.
No, and there's two reasons for that. The first one is the resources of producing an app is something that Social Hiking doesn't have. But I think more importantly, if we developed a social hiking app that let you share your location or share media, that app will you'd have to use that app instead of another app that you might like for doing that, or another service that has an app that you prefer, and you end up losing, instead of concentrating on the main aim of social hiking is to help you share what you're doing together, connecting your dots of either location or media. But instead we'd end up concentrating on having to compete with other services that perhaps do things better than we would do. And that seems a lot of effort to waste when we can work with other apps that do a particular thing better.
So you can use your technologies to bind things together in a very interesting way. And in a sense, if a computer mapping company or a social media company opens up its APIs, its interfaces to you, then you both benefit. It's a kind of development of a mutual community, but you have to understand the notion of community to be able to get that right in the first place.
Yeah, I suppose so, and it's always been another important element of social hiking is that when a photo appears on a map, that photo is always linked back to the source service. It's always linked back to the user who originally shared it, because it's not about saying we want all the users to sit on social hiking. It's about helping people discover like-minded people that use the services that they use.
You're listening to The Outdoor Station.
We're sitting in the middle of a beautiful forest here. Obviously there are some boy racers nearby. One of the things that interests me is I'll try and be diplomatic here, but I'm not going to succeed, I don't think. The failure of some of the conventional specialist media to really come to grips with the new internet social world. I would have thought by now that one of the major magazines, for example, would have really cracked the online forum world, but I don't think any of them have really done it. And I spent a lot of time wondering why that is. And one of the things that strikes me is that there's a lot of conventional print, for example, print magazines work on the basis of aspiration being quite important. So you may not want to. You may not walk through the wild highlands of Scotland, but one day you might aspire to do it. And so I think a lot of the editorial copy that comes from these is on the basis that, well, people like to read about things that, well, they might do one day or they might get around to. It's entertaining, it's exciting. But I think that misses the point that for a lot of people, they're just as interested
in people who have the same, the same experiences that they do. So, they may just toddle around the fields on a Sunday locally, or they may just take the dogs walking for a pub. And it seems to me that what social hiking does, it plays to that everyday audience of us mere mortals in a way that some of these other specialist services, particularly conventional print media, can't do.
Absolutely, and it's that range of seeing not just people who are on multiple year long trips, or people who are climbing 6 Munros on a weekend away, but it's also people who are walking in their local forests, walking in the local fields around where they live. And we actually, there's a feature on Social Hiking which is an automatic peak bagging feature, which means that when you share your location and you happen to be on what's classed as a peak, it changes a symbol. And we took the decision in Europe to not just include mountains and peaks that are thousands of feet high, but to include all the hills that were available. So even if you go up something that's maybe 100 metres tall, you still get that reward. You still get acknowledgement that you've gone out and you've gone outdoors and you've climbed a hill, because I think that's really important, because not everyone is either experienced enough or able to climb a big peak, and it's about helping to encourage and inspire people to get outdoors and do their own adventures or micro adventures.
And each of us has our own level of adventure and our own sense of satisfaction when we've achieved whatever we've achieved. I've got a friend who has taken up Munro bagging, so he's quite obsessive about it, as they tend to be. That's another part of the audience I've just annoyed. And I can't get him interested in computer mapping at all. It would make it a lot easier if he was interested in this, because we're planning a few Munro expeditions together. But the thing that caught his imagination was the automatic peat bagging system. When I said to him, if you use this system and you get to the top of Ben Macdui, it will automatically know that you've completed a Munro. And at that point, he got really quite excited.
It is a very popular feature, and a lot of the kind of support inquiries that tend to come in are people who have climbed a peak, but the system hasn't quite recognised it, because they're maybe a few metres away from the tolerance as to what counts as a peak, and they're like, I climbed that peak, I want it back, which is absolutely fair enough. And it is, and I can't take credit for the idea, because it was a chap called Stephen Horner who originally suggested it, but it's just another feature that helps, and this is all happening automatically as you share your data. So when you get home, you have this map of your photos, your tweets, and the peaks that you've climbed on that trip.
I can imagine a whole series of outdoor walker people, perhaps over 60, who are listening to this with slight amazement. But the truth is that for a whole generation growing up with sharing media, the sharing of whatever everything is important, and the notion that you can go to a place and you can look at somebody, you can see where they've been, what they've tackled, you can see their photographs, you can see the stories that they've interwoven around it. It's really truly a unique resource, and if people haven't checked out Social Hiking yet, they should do so. But it begs the question, where on earth does this go next? And I just wonder where you think this kind of interactivity could take us, particularly in the outdoor world.
I think the one, or certainly the one main area that's definitely missing is that social hiking is helping to connect all these bits of media shared on different services, and it's not just photos and audio, but it's also photos and tweets, but it's also audio and videos and other media, and because it's helping people connect that media with an actual route. But the one thing that's missing is helping to make that information discoverable, allowing people to say, well, I'm going to go to this part of the world or this part of the country and climb these peaks. Who else has walked there? Who walks there the most? Who can I interact with and connect with to get some advice on the best way of tackling that peak, perhaps, or the best area to walk in near that location, and to put into that the photos and all the media. I think that would be an amazing resource that benefits not just the person looking at that particular area, but also the users their content is being further shared out to people.
I have a section on my own website of resources that relate to the Pyrenees. And about this time each year, I start getting a flood of emails from people saying, how can I get to this town? Can I buy fuel here? Is there an ATM machine in it? All that kind of basic information that you often need to know about a place, but which often isn't in the guidebooks. And it's kind of grown in a very higgledy-piggledy way. And I often sit there and think, maybe I should spend a bit of time tidying this up and presenting it more professionally. It requires a real editorial job to do that. But in a way, actually, in the way that Wikipedia, to a large extent, is developed and mediated by the readers, that kind of service is something that's really, I think, made for the kind of social media interaction that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, but particularly if you have the ability to search a given area and see what was shared, what people were talking about, what information they shared, because there's things like Foursquare check-ins, for instance, which can be supported as well.
Foursquare is a social media service that allows you to check into places. It's a bit difficult to explain, but it's becoming like a little mini micro review site as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a way of being able to kind of give knowledge about a particular physical location, be it a pub or a hotel or a cafe. So there's a lot of information that's being shared there, and if you can connect people with both that information, but also the people who have been to those places and done things there, to be able to connect to them, to say, I noticed you. I found that after I did Offa's Dyke, that I had quite a lot of people over the years that have contacted me saying, which bit would you recommend, or are there any good walks in this area? And I think it's just providing that resource, not just with maps, but that information and those contacts. Yeah,
there's I mentioned the Pyrenees earlier. There's an important trailhead town there called Courtrai, and a hotel, a small hotel run by a lovely Irish couple, at least there was. And it was particularly useful because if you didn't speak French, you could go and stay there, have a couple of rest days, and they would tell you which stores to go and get supplies and provisions from, the rest of it. And somebody sent me an email the other day saying, have they sold their hotel? Because the web page has gone down, and it looks as if it has. At some point I have to go back and completely rewrite that whole page on that section, because I know a lot of people have relied on it. That kind of social media service would do that instantly.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone turns up at the hotel and tweets going, the hotel's changed hands, or it's gone downhill since I last visited. It's all that kind of information from people actually on the ground at those places.
So this is the kind of stuff that really conventional media can't replicate, even as it moves from, say, print to the web or tablets, either in terms of guidebooks or in terms of magazines. They can't deal with that kind of almost real-time reality checking, I guess.
Yeah, it's almost real-time mass user generated guidebooks, essentially, I guess, is what that information put together could mean.
Now, you're obviously a computer professional, and you watch the IT world very keenly. We've just been having a wonderful hour's geeky talk about where things might be going. And I know you've given a number of talks at a number of industry conferences that have been very influential, have gone down well. So you watch trends and see how they're happening. Maybe a few years ago, people started getting very worried about the idea that people will go into the hills and just take a mobile phone with them and use that as their GPS device or take maps on them. But actually, the technology's improved, battery life's getting better, you can protect your phones much more. And while I would never recommend that anybody went out into the wild country without taking a paper map with them, it's quite clear that the pace of hardware development is actually opening all kinds of new avenues. Are we going to see some big changes in that area over the next 5-10 years, do you think?
I hope so. The two massive limitations with being able to go out and share in the wilds are the signal, by the nature of being wild, that there aren't, thankfully, telephone masts everywhere, and then there's also battery life. As phones get cleverer and more powerful, they also tend to run out of batteries much quicker. And likewise, I would always say that you have to have a paper map with you, whatever technological solution you're using. So certainly, I mean, it'd be great for those things to improve, to allow particularly battery life, so that your device can last longer. It's quite often raised when you talk about social hiking is that particularly perhaps people who don't share much online, that you know the idea of these people out in the wilds, you know, with mobile devices is quite unpleasant. And it's what social hiking and sites like it's about. It's people who are sharing things anyway. The first batch of users were bloggers who would normally go out, take a few photos of their walk, and then come home and write it up. And share the photos, and it's just that natural progression is to say, well, you know, you can do it as it's happening, as you're actually out there experiencing it.
Now let's just talk about commercial know-how for a moment. I mean, how on earth do you finance social hiking? I mean, is it a business? Is it intending to be? How on earth do you make it run?
Until about June last year, it was 100% self-funded. So it was me doing all the work on it, and paying for hosting costs and things like that. In June, thanks to the recommendation or the request of a couple of users, I opened up supporter accounts which allow users to contribute financially to the ongoing development of the site. And I was absolutely amazed by the response, and it's been absolutely fantastic. Users have really got together and got behind what we're trying to achieve. And that now provides enough revenue to support the site. It pays for hosting and other costs like that. Going forward, it would be nice to find ways to make it more sustainable, so that more time can be committed to developing the site and improving it and adding even more features that users want to it.
So it's not a business in the strict sense. It's an undertaking that's driven by A, your technical abilities, and B, your love of the outdoors, really.
Yeah, it's almost a social enterprise. Its success and its growth is entirely down to the users who have got behind what we're trying to achieve, both financially and in terms of marketing as well. It's users sharing about the site, telling people about it, helping people with it. So I'd probably almost class it as a social enterprise rather than a business.
You're listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk.
Do you think that the fact that a lot of commercial entities, big and small, don't really understand the notion of this as a driver, it kind of limits progress a little bit? Because we were talking earlier about it. I mean, I use some Amazon links and ads on my blog because I review quite a lot of books, and it pulls in. I think he put in about 40 quid last year, which isn't much, but actually it goes a fair way to paying my provider costs for running the blog. So in a sense, anybody that does that is kind of contributing to something in a community kind of way. You were telling me earlier that actually these supporter accounts now meet your hosting costs, which is again part of the community element of it. And I suppose one of the frustrations about why is it so many commercial entities are so slow at adopting some of these new social media technologies in a very open way is simply because they don't understand the model. But in reality, they will benefit by opening up their systems to third-party services like you, because they, in a million years, would never be able to develop something with the enthusiasm and the drive that you've been able to do with the support of your users.
Absolutely.
So why aren't they doing it? Why aren't people rushing to say, actually, this is good, we'll embrace it? Because I don't think they're ever going to do that themselves.
I think it's. I mean, as I said when I did a talk a few months ago, if I'd sat down now and specced out fully the whole site and what it does and what I wanted to achieve, I don't think it would end up what it is, what it has ended up as. I think because it was never about money. It's not a commercial venture. So it's just been allowed to grow organically around the users. It's features are added because users have requested it, and it's watching users and seeing how they use it, and some of the ways that I would never have thought about using the site for, that they've tried to use, from sharing skiing holidays to we had a non-government organisation that was looking at using it to share their trips to India, and it's all that kind of thing that I think if you sit down first and you're concentrating on how can we pay for this, how can we justify the investment, it's quite difficult to get past that to see the benefits of what will happen once it's built.
So the quality of feedback that you can get back from this is far greater than you would by just saving, let's say, a customer's form or something like that. You can actually see how people are using it, how they stumble upon ideas in sometimes the most lateral way. We're at an interesting time. We were talking earlier about the Ordnance Survey's decision to produce their own mapping software for iPhones and for Android phones. At the time when there were quite a number of companies that do that, who license and buy their maps from the Ordnance Survey, and you wonder about it. But what strikes me about that is that whatever else happens, and they'll take a fair chunk of that basic market because they are the Ordnance Survey, basic Sunday walkers and ramblers, but they're not going to drive that innovation. Because as a corporation, A, they don't have to, and B, because they don't understand that level of user base, do they?
No, it almost seems as if they've seen what other people have done and gone, oh, we'll have a bit of that as well. And certainly, I had a brief conversation with their faceless Google Plus account about, were they looking at, for instance, including the ability to do live sharing for interaction with third parties, and they came back saying, oh no, but we are looking at building a community, allowing people to share routes to each other, which is what the other big players in the market are already doing. There's nothing innovative. There's nothing that's going to help drive forward the kind of innovation in these outdoor mobile apps, which I think is a real shame. And it's social hiking. It exists because ViewRanger opened up their feature on their app called Buddy Beacon, which lets you ping your location to their servers. Because they opened that up 2 years ago, social hiking exists, and that's quite forward thinking of them to think, well, let's go beyond what we're doing and see what other people can do with this as well.
I think, and again, we were talking earlier about the frustrations people are having with a lot of existing services. I mean, Facebook is the obvious one at the moment, where it's very difficult to find people not complaining about it at the moment because of the way it's having to commercialise itself to meet its flotation targets. And it may have been the case, I don't know, maybe even a year, 2 years ago, that you would have looked at Facebook as a kind of new media giant that would live on forever. But I'm beginning to wonder now, and that whether even something like that big, that global, maybe has a kind of more finite lifespan to it. But because in a sense, any IT company, and particularly small ones, really are going to benefit from being open and opening up their APIs and opening up their systems to allow the community to grow, aren't they?
No, absolutely, and I think we're well into the age of people wanting to share things, but I think we're drifting towards the age where people actually care about what they can do with the stuff that they've published, and more importantly, what the company you shared it with is doing with it. And I think issues like both open data and being able to allow you to use your data how you want to use it, netted against the privacy of knowing how your data is being used is going to become more and more important.
Well, that's really been a fascinating discussion. If people want to know more about social hiking, where do they go to find out?
You can visit the website at www.shareyouradventure.com. We're also on Google+. If you search for social hiking, you'll find both our page on Google+ and the social hiking users community. And we're also on Twitter as Social Hiking.
Okay, and we'll put all of those links into the show notes on the Outdoor Station website, as we would usually do. Phil, thanks for that. It's a fascinating area. I think it's an area that can only grow, and I think we should just repeat again, the only thing that's holding people back is the willingness of established companies to open up their systems to allow sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been great talking to you all.
Okay, so get on, open up your systems, and let's allow that internet-based outdoor community to grow even faster.
Well, thanks again to Phil there for a fascinating interview. You can learn more about social hiking by going direct to www.shareyouradventure.com or by simply putting social hiking into your favourite search engine. There's no doubt in my mind that social hiking is already an important resource for anyone wanting to explore the great outdoors, particularly here in the UK. I was lucky enough to get a sneak preview of some of the new features that Phil wants to roll out over the coming months, and I can only say that I was impressed. I hope this is one service that's going to be at the heart of our outdoor community for some years to come.
Thanks again to Phil and to Andy, of course, for putting the interview together. We are actually now tweeting our podcast too, so you can find us on an abbreviated name, which is Outdoors ST. Outdoors ST. So latch onto our tweets, as we have a lot of interesting and varied content coming later on this year. So somewhere in amongst all this tweeting, podcasting, editing and videoing, I must get out for a walk at some stage. I need some fresh air. So until next time, folks, stay tuned and bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear more from our extensive free library, please visit the website at theoutdoorstation.co.uk, the home of UK-based audio and video podcasts for outdoors people everywhere.